By this time, we have a lot of great images successfully captured. But the day is not over yet. And as it turns out, our quaint little town might just present us with a few surprises. We didn't necessarily plan for the next series of images, but sometimes inspiration strikes in the most unusual places.
So, quick little added bonus. The restaurant just popped open a bunch of really beautiful umbrellas. So we're gonna do a couple of tests to showcase the difference between telephoto and wide. Let's see what we get. All right, I'm gonna bring this in a little tighter to kind of a medium shot, so kind of like here to here, and I'm gonna get low so we can get all these colors in behind you. So what I wanna see is more of a body facing that direction, head towards back over here, and we'll try to get a few frames in like this. Lovely. I love it. All right, that's beautiful, very nice. Chin down just a tad, there we go, kind of like, very good, very good, very good. I love it. All right, let's see. Let's see, let's see. Busy, come on. I'm a little dark. All right, let's do exactly the same thing we had. Body towards the building, chin down a little bit. Yes, looking into me. Very nice, I love it. Beautiful, beautiful, that is fantastic.
All right, when we start to look at these images, it's easy to tell why you get so excited looking through the viewfinder at a scene like this. Our umbrellas just sprouted up out of nowhere like so many gigantic colorful flowers, and they really created this beautiful surrealistic colorscape. Now, at the risk of sounding maybe a little bit too technical here, if I had it to do over again, I would probably shoot at a little bit of a higher F number, maybe 5.6 or even 6, so that we could start to bring some of those umbrellas into a little bit more focus. They are super blurry, and from the audience's perspective, it's almost impossible to tell what's behind her other than just this beautiful wash of colors. Our viewers have been watching the video, so we know that it's umbrellas, but again, to someone who's seeing an image like this, singular, for the first time, it's going to look a little unusual. All the same, I'll allow it because it's just so sweeping and beautiful. I've never actually seen an image like this until now, and so it definitely gets a lot of points for being unique. One thing I think it's important to point out is that the restaurant behind Ashley is in fact private property, and as we start to see patrons come in to eat breakfast, it's probably a good idea for us to not have a bunch of gigantic cameras pointing at them. It seems like a little bit of an invasion of privacy, so we were really under the gun to lock these images in quickly and get out of the way before we really became a distraction to the city. So we kind of had to fire off a bunch of frames in a mad panic. And while I consider this to be a very strong creative success, I might have changed up a couple of technical details if I had it to do again. When you're outside shooting pictures on location, especially in a very public location, you represent the photography community at large. And you always want to make sure that you bring a positive influence to your local community. That helps to make all photographers look good. It's like they say, the rising tide raises all ships. Alright, moving right along, we come across what I would consider to be yet another happy accident. This feels like a very personal, candid moment. I don't think that either of us actually planned this image. I just happened to be furiously firing off shutter frames as we attempted to get in and get out before the people showed up for breakfast. But all in all, I'm really happy with the way this turned out. It's just this, once again, a very personal, private moment that just looks so beautiful and so comfortable. This is just one of those little moments that happen completely naturally, and it will probably never happen again. So always remember to shoot more frames than you think you need. And full disclosure, it's not 100% razor sharp. I always find myself to be completely meticulous about sharpness in an image, and this image has just a tiny little hint of motion blur. It's not 100% tack sharp, but in this case, it's actually not the end of the world because Ashley's eyes are not visible to the viewer. So instead we just get this tiny little fringe of motion blur, and it's only if you can look up really close. We'll probably show it to you later in the edit. But it never fails. One of your favorite images is always going to be ever so slightly out of focus. Go figure. And interestingly enough, today's adventures with umbrellas are not quite over yet.
Okay, quick little pro tip. We selected the ugliest place we could possibly find for location work. This just goes to show that photography is all about context. When we add one tiny little prop, watch what happens.
Yes, our little mountain town is very picturesque. However, there will be certain times when the environment you have to work with is not exactly ideal. This doesn't necessarily have to stop you in your tracks, however, because when it comes to photography, the viewer only sees what you allow them to see. This enables us to design very beautiful scenes even if we're standing in front of the ugliest place in town. There's kind of an old saying, when you're working on location, you're probably never more than a few steps away from a dumpster, a fire hydrant, or maybe even somebody picking their nose. None of those environmental factors ever have to make it into your final product because once again, you paint the scene. You control what the viewer sees. In this case, a very simple wooden and paper parasol has literally taken our tragic environment out of the equation altogether. And all we're left with is the beautiful light left to fall upon the scene. Here we can see how our telephoto lens allows us to isolate Ashley and completely lock the viewer into the scene that we have created. It's a beautiful image, elegant, simple, and in this case, actually quite timeless. And it shows that as long as we control the perspective that the viewer has, we can shoot in almost any environment and accomplish great things. Next, we're going to revisit one of our previous scenes and get a whole new perspective on some of that architecture that we kind of missed out on using the telephoto lens in our earlier lesson.
So we're still here at our first location and we want to try to mix up the perspective a little bit. If you look behind us, we have this beautiful, beautiful row of lanterns that kind of fade off into the distance. Now we were able to see some of those in our initial composition down below because JT was using a wide angle lens. I, on the other hand, was running everything in telephoto and I wasn't really able to kind of bring those into the scene. So what we're going to do here is take a slightly different perspective. We can shoot Ashley from up top and that way I can incorporate a lot of this beautiful architecture. So we'll see what we come up with. Let's try a few just kind of like looking normal. Do just sort of a casual, chilling, hanging out. Another really great way to get our hands into the scenes. I like it.
Alright, as I'm sure you could hear from the previous clip, the delivery trucks have finally begun roaring across the streets, and it just goes to show you can't always control every single environmental factor when you're working outside. Fortunately, the photo camera cannot actually hear sounds, and so the only way that the final viewer is going to know about the gigantic garbage truck parked right outside of your photo shoot is if you tell the story. Anyway, moving into our first image, we have a nice initial shot of Ashley. Once again, you can see this railing kind of casually moving through the scene, and this gives us a great way to naturally bring her hands up into the image. Our little street lamps, which we were very curious about earlier, have definitely made an appearance. They are very out of focus, and again, if I had this shot to do over again, I think I probably would have come up to about an f5.6, maybe even an f.7, so that I could have brought some more of that environment into the image. I'm not offended by the fact that the lamps are really disappearing into our scene. I think they actually do look beautiful, and once again, this is just a stylistic interpretation of the scene. There is one lantern that's a little bit close to Ashley's forehead. I think I probably should have moved over just a tad so it doesn't really look like it's kind of growing out the side of her hair. But again, things are so out of focus that it's very difficult for the viewer to be distracted by any of these background elements. They really just gracefully fall away into a dark dissolve. And at the time, that's definitely what we were going for. After a lightning quick wardrobe change, we move right along into our next image. This brings us in a little bit tighter. We have a stronger headshot in this case. As you can see, the background has become even more dissolved because our telephoto lens is coming in a little bit tighter on Ashley. But once more, the viewer can do nothing but focus on her. She has a delightful, engaging little smile which really draws the audience in. There are beautiful catch lights in those bright brown eyes, and it's just really hard to take your eyes off of the subject of this image. We want to be careful when we shoot environmental portraits that we don't give the viewer a way to escape the image. If there were some kind of a distracting element off to the side, maybe a diagonal line leading straight out the corner of the image, the viewer would have a way to latch on to that element and send his or her eye straight out of the picture. In this case, we kind of lock eyes with Ashley and we're not really allowed to let go. In a good way, of course. And no location is complete without the smolder. Here, once again, we have a nice tight headshot. There are no distracting elements that can take us away from those mesmerizing eyes that Ashley has focused right in on the center of the lens. We're slightly over the shoulder here, which gives it kind of a casual appearance. Her head has just enough of a tilt to make everything look comfortable, and this is a very natural looking image. As we start to come up towards our final images in the set, we threw on another quick little wardrobe change to give Ashley the ability to kind of bring some of her clothing into the mix, and as you can see, we've gone from smolder to kind of fun and flirty. Once again, we are in very tight on a telephoto. There are very few distracting elements. I would say that the sun was starting to come out a little bit much over on the right-hand side. You can see what is almost becoming a pretty strong exposure burnout. There's a large blob of bright orange color off to the right-hand side of the screen. If you were a Photoshop genius, you could probably take that out, but again, I feel like I like the natural look. That's just kind of how it happened in the scene, and I don't really see a reason to go spending a great deal of time messing with the natural flow of the image. From a compositional and contextual standpoint, I like this image only as part of a series. The previous 3 images showed Ashley's face very prominently. The viewer makes a strong connection with her. You can see her eyes, you can see her mouth, you can see her lips, and in another case you can see her hands. This particular image, it hides her mouth completely, and while this is fun and flirty, if this was literally the only image that you got during the entire day, I would consider this to be not a successful photo shoot. Again, we want to be able to see her entirely. Now, because her mouth is covered, this image works beautifully as part of a series because we've already seen Ashley's entire face in several other incarnations of this image. So again, if you're going to cover up a part of your model, her face, her eyes, or anything important, make sure that it's a part of a series and that the other images in the series clearly reveal who your model is. This is a fun, flirty little way to round off our final set of images right up here. All in all, I would say this is a very successful conclusion to our first day of shooting.
So we're still at our same location. We've gone up the street. Here's what I like about this place. Yeah, man! Yeah, pretty sure that guy yelled at us last time. Actually, this would be a good time to bring the little scarf in, because your shoulders are super burned.
After a full day of shooting, it's time to set aside the gear, take a load off the feet, and tuck into one of Manitou's many local delicacies. We have a lot of great images in the can and lots of Photoshop on the horizon, which is why we'll see you in the next lesson.